yes, to Heather Gaddis, who's going to be in charge of the session today. Heather is, hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Heather is one of, it's a very important part of our wonderful teacher training team in Mexico. She's got lots of experience, yes. And you know, it's not easy to do what she's doing, or she's about to start doing, which is talking to, yeah, 600 people online. But I'm pretty sure that we're all going to have a great time. Again, it's great to see so many of you here. Yeah, it's great to see people from all over the country. Welcome to International House. Welcome to, como decimos, ¿no? Bienvenidos a su casa. Y si hoy no estamos en su casa, ¿sí? Y no están en la nuestra, we're all in the same place. Thank you very much. Heather, all yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen so we can get started. Okay, everybody. So today our topic is going to be keeping yourself motivated and your students. So we often think about our students' motivation, but I think it's very important for us to think about ourselves and not burning out as we make this transition, or we figure out what the new school year is going to look like, or what our current summer is going to look like if we're teaching in the summer. So let me just get the chat up so I can see all of your great questions before we get started. Okay, there we go. So, okay. So today, as I said, we're going to be talking about motivation, your motivation, as well as your students' motivation. And so I want to start off with a little question, a little reflection for those of you who are teaching, or you could also think about if you're a student or if you've been taking any online courses. When we think about how the last couple months have gone since March, how have you grown as a teacher in the last few months? Or how have you grown as an individual as we've gone through this change? So one thing I wanted to talk about as we get started is, you know, as we're going through a moment of change, especially one that makes us feel out of control, it can be difficult for us to find a source of motivation. We don't really know what to grab onto. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm hopefully in a few seconds, I'll start hearing from you. How have you grown as a teacher in the last few months? What new techniques have you tried? Have you become more patient or understanding with your students and your fellow teachers? Are you collaborating more with other teachers? So I'm seeing a couple of answers starting to roll in with the chat. So being more resourceful, of course, and learning how to make videos, right? So maybe some people had gotten into it a little bit before, but definitely a lot more now. Collaboration, apps, being creative. Of course, yeah, technology development and leaning on your peer teachers, right, as a way to help you get through. Good. So yeah, resilient. Technology, funny, yep, got to be funny, and especially when there's nothing else you can do. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different areas related to keeping you and your students motivated. So the first idea that we're going to focus on is strategies for connecting with students online, how to create a community, how to build rapport with our students online. And then we'll be reflecting about our own professional practice as teachers and how that can help us keep motivated when we're facing challenges. And then we'll finally discuss ways of keeping the students engaged in a class online. Okay, so I just want to point out here, so our little characters up at the top. So on the left, we have me. This is my avatar that I made using Facebook. And then on the right, we have a little student. So you'll notice that on some slides, both the student and the teacher are present, meaning that these strategies can help with motivation for both sides. And then on other slides, you'll see that it's just one, the teacher or the student, meaning the information is more related to one side. Somebody is saying that they can't see the presentation. Can everyone see the presentation? Yes, okay, so maybe just figuring out how to configure it on your screen so that you can see me and the presentation. Thank you for the confirmation. Okay, so everyone raise your hands virtually or write it in the chat if you are currently giving sessions via Zoom, Google Meets, or some other video conferencing tool and you find it exhausting. So second part of the question, that you find it exhausting at the end of a class. Good. So yeah, so I see yes with an exclamation point. Yes, you feel relieved. Good. So I find myself raising my hand too because when all of my activities shifted online, I felt more drained at the end of the day. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So one is that we as teachers, even the introverted ones, we thrive off of connecting with our students. We love seeing the look on their faces when they understand a topic. We like watching them engage in conversation in English. And there are certain aspects of that that are hard to replicate online. So one thing is teaching online and learning online can certainly feel isolating and confusing. So I want to talk about some ways that we can feel a bit more connected. So the first area that we're going to focus on is multiple communication tools. So using it to give feedback and to build rapport, using visual aids as an anchor for your students so that they don't feel lost in space, and then the importance of setting clear goals. Okay. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is using multiple communication channels. And so what I mean by this is reaching out to your students in multiple ways. So for example, if you're in a Zoom or a Google Meets, you're meeting with them live, I like to use different sources of information. So I like to have the students turn their camera on when possible, at least for the first 5 minutes. As a teacher, it really helps you to kind of get an idea of their mood and how people are feeling. And I also like to use the chat a lot. So sometimes the students are coming on, I'll send them a chat. How are you doing? You know, how is your son? How is this going? These are things that we would normally do anyway, but I think sometimes we feel a little bit awkward being so direct in the online classroom. So it's good for us to be very intentional about building rapport, you know, connecting with students through different channels of sending them a chat, asking how they're doing. Because I think sometimes when I ask my students how they're doing, they're so confused, like no one has ever asked them how they're doing, especially on Zoom. So building rapport in that intentional way, using the camera, the microphone, and the chat, both private and publicly. So if you're using something like Zoom, you can use a private chat just to send something to an individual student to check in on them. So I see Lorena, certainly take notes, and I can ask about having the presentation be made available to you. I'll ask about that, Lorena. Thank you for the question. So another way that we can reach out to students is if we're using some sort of asynchronous, so asynchronous meaning a learning management system like Moodle, like Blackboard, like Google Classroom, something of that nature. So using that in order to also keep in constant contact with our students. And so that's important so that they don't feel lost. Like, what am I supposed to do now, teacher? So using both of those tools is very important. So the last thing I wanted to point out was about building rapport. So in building rapport, like I said, it's something that we do anyway, but we need to be more intentional about it in the online classroom. So I'm just seeing a nice comment from Susanna about, yeah, she spends more of her time asking students to turn on their video. So yeah, so that can be something that is difficult. It's something that I wouldn't force students to do, turn on their camera, maybe try to do it the first minute or so, just to see that there's somebody really on the other end. But don't force it, because as some students may be embarrassed by their living circumstances, so or they may have Wi-Fi problems. So it's something that's nice, but we have these also microphone and chat as other ways to build rapport with students. So building rapport is building relationship with students. So you're making sure that we're treating them as a human being and not just as, you know, a number or a name on the screen. Okay. Okay. So the next item when it comes to building rapport and relationship and also making students feel motivated when they're in the online classroom or in a Zoom session is the use of visual aids. So I really like to start off my classes with just a little bit of an agenda. It doesn't have to be too complicated. So it might just be, we're going to do a listening activity, we're going to do a little bit of grammar, and we're going to end with a writing activity. Or we're going to use a Kahoot in there, or we're going to use Quizlet. And so what this does is for students who are having connectivity issues, they have some sort of basis. They can visualize what's going to happen that day. And even if maybe they don't hear everything that you say, or they don't understand everything that you said, they kind of have a list of they know where they're going to go with you that day. And also they can start to anticipate things. If they really like Kahoot or they really like a certain game that they know you're going to be playing, it helps them to stay motivated maybe through some of the parts of the class that are less motivating for them. And so I also like to use visuals for instruction. So again, instructions can be complicated for students. They can feel lost as you're explaining. So putting the instructions up on the screen, sharing them, and then you can highlight different parts using some sort of annotation tool to draw or to underline is really helpful for students. Because again, if they're having connectivity issues and they have a low level of English or they have difficulties with listening in general, then the instructions being on the screen can be really helpful. I also like to send the instructions through the chat because even though sometimes, we think, oh, it's only one question. Certainly students can remember that. Then, but it's still difficult for them to remember the questions sometimes, especially when we move them into breakout rooms. They kind of get all kind of confused and kind of where am I, who am I? And so sending them the questions can be very helpful and can make sure that they spend more time on task. I also really like to use image prompts, something again we do in a face-to-face classroom, but I think image prompts, a picture or a video prompt works even better because we can be super flexible. We can have different images for different students. We can have different videos for different students. We can make use of the internet in order to allow them to choose some of the material that they want to work with. And then finally, I think it's really important to model task. Do the task for the students or do one example task. And the reason this is because, again, it's confusing and isolating sometimes to work by yourself online. So having a concrete example will let students know what is expected of them. So I'm going to show you an example of an image prompt that I used with my students the other day. This was a B2 level group. And so what I did here was a virtual art gallery walkthrough. So we had been in the class, we had watched a short video about Starry Night and about talking about describing art using adverbs and adjectives. And so what I asked them to do here was pick a picture, a painting from Google Art and Culture, and then they had to narrate as if they were a museum guide. They had to narrate a little bit about the painting, about the artist, and how relevant parts of the artist's life. So you can see here that I gave them, this was my example for them. And so what I did here, all of them contributed to this one Google slide work presentation. So all of them could see each other's. And in a future class, because I did this just on Monday, and in tomorrow's class, I'm going to use these in order to do listening activities with each other's. And so here, this was my example. So I have my name, the name of the painting and the artist. And then here you can see I included the audio file. And so here you could see a student of mine did the same thing using my example. So I have the student's name, the name of the artwork, the artist, and then here you can see that he recorded a short, a 2-minute, in this case, a 2-minute audio describing the artist and the painting and relevant parts of the artist's life. Okay, so this was a really good way for students. One, I gave them instructions I put the visual instructions, I gave them a model that they could refer to, and then they could also see how everybody else was doing it to make sure that they were doing it correctly. So it was a really fun activity. And you could also do this at a slightly lower, just change the expectations a little bit for a different level of student. So this was a low B2. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the importance of setting clear goals when we're in an online classroom or teaching online. And the reason I think this is particularly important when we teach online is because students can choose to do something else. So when we have them physically in a classroom, they can escape, I suppose, but it's a little bit harder for them to escape. But when we have them online, they have so many other things going on in their lives. They might have a baby crying, they might have their dog snoring underneath their desk, they might have a million other things that they need to get done and other demands on their time. So we need to be respectful of that, and we need to let them know what is the objective or the purpose of the activity. One, so that they know what they're learning or what they're supposed to be learning. Yeah, and they also might be watching videos or just doing other things that are distracting themselves. So exactly, Susanna. So we need to be super, super clear about the objective and the purpose of the activity so that they know why they're doing it. And that means they're more likely to do it. Also, being super clear about the objective and the purpose will help to clear up any confusion as soon as possible. Because one thing that we have when we're physically in the classroom is that we can, hear students having problems, or maybe there's some confusion, and we can go and we can kind of quickly nip it in the bud, and we can re-explain it. Maybe we even stop the whole class. That's harder to do online. We're not getting that constant feedback from students or that chit chat that often goes on. So being being clear about the objective or the purpose and the instructions from the start can help to avoid that confusion. Because also, if a student spends more time figuring out what they're supposed to do than they actually spend on the task, they're going to be confused, and they're not going to be motivated to continue working, and they're not going to finish the activity. So yeah, Susanna, so being super clear, this is the agenda for today. And then when you give them a classwork assignment or some sort of assessment saying, this is the reason I'm giving you this assessment, you are using this language for this purpose. And that's related to rubrics and grading checklists. So again, this isn't something that it's just generally good practice, but we should be giving students the rubric or the grading checklist, depending on what you're going to use, from the beginning. So when we set the activity, when we set the project or the assessment, we need to be clear about how we will assess that. It's because it's just like me sending you off and to watch a movie, which we can't do these days, but I send you off to watch a movie and you watch it, and then you come back and I give you all of questions, super detailed, about who was the second director, who was this, and you're like, you didn't tell me you were going to assess me. You didn't tell me how you were going to assess me. So it's the same thing for students. We need to tell them how they're going to be assessed so they can focus on those elements and on improving those elements and using the checklist in order to grade themselves. So if we think back to the example that I just showed you with the art gallery walkthrough, I gave students a 4-item checklist. This is what I'm going to grade. I kept it quite simple because this was a classwork exercise. It wasn't an exam. It wasn't a project. It was something that we took about 30 minutes in class. So that's why I kept it quite short. So the first one, I wanted it to last at least 2 minutes. Obviously, all the content needed to be relevant, but at least 2 minutes, because that's appropriate for this level of B2. I wanted it to include a variety of adjectives and adverbs, because that was our topic for that day. We had previously seen a video and talked about different ways of comparing and comparing using adverbs and adjectives, and also different structures. I also wanted it to include at least 3 verb tenses, because the previous week we had done a review of verb tenses. And I told them that their speech needed to be comprehensible. I needed to be able to understand all of what they were saying. So this was my grading checklist. You could make this a little bit more complicated, or a little bit, not complicated, but a little bit more complete. If you were doing a more long-term project or a bigger project, you could use a rubric. So a rubric would be like a matrix where you have different criteria and then different levels of performance. A really good way, if rubrics seem a little daunting, a little difficult to get started with, how do you write a rubric, is to use Rubistar. And I'll write this in the chat. So Rubistar. It's not the prettiest website in the world, but it will be a really good way for you to get started with the language of rubrics to make sure your language is standardized. Another way to get started with using rubrics, especially to grade speaking and writing, is to use a publicly available rubric for an exam, say the first certificate or the PET exam. You can find those that Cambridge has made available, and you can base your rubric off of that because those are the expectations for a certain level. So yeah, super important making sure that students are aware of why they're doing an activity and how they're going to be assessed on that activity. Okay, so now as teachers, I want to get into the idea of engaging in reflection about our professional practice as a way to keep ourselves motivated. So we have to keep in mind that we are human beings working with other human beings. So we need to constantly be thinking about how our teaching, our planning, our knowledge, our assumptions about teaching are affecting our students in the way that they're learning. So here are a few ways that you can start to engage in some reflective practice. So the first is to constantly ask questions, right? Specific questions. So why did this happen? How did this happen? Why are my instructions not working? You know, how are students responding to my instructions? So this will help you, asking more specific questions will help you to get to more specific answers, right? So you might ask, instead of asking, why do I never finish my lesson plan? A problem that many of us have. You might start to ask, what are some specific activities that take too long? What part of my lesson plan takes longer than I expected? Or how can I change my lesson planning so that it's more precise about timing? Also, instead of asking a general question like, why are my students always off task? We might ask ourselves, how can I make my instructions clear? How can I check that students have actually understood my instructions so that they can do the task? So asking specific questions about our teaching is always a good idea. And then another key part of reflective practice is the willingness to try out new ideas. So, for good or for bad, we've all been forced or strongly encouraged to try out new ideas over the last couple months. So, we can see this as a burden or we can see this as an opportunity. So, maybe you've always wanted to use Google Docs or Google Slides to have students collaborate on a task. Google Slides was what I use with these students, but it was always just easier in your classroom to have them do it on paper or to have them do it individually. Now is a really good time to take that chance and to try out these new ideas, to look for these resources, to ask other teachers. So talking with colleagues, ask other teachers what they're doing and trying it out. So as you talk with colleagues, you can do this through sharing your ideas, activities, and materials, and also practicing with a colleague to try out a new game or a new activity. So sometimes we're nervous when we want to try out a new activity, and we might be too nervous to try it out with students. So it's good you can try it out with a couple colleagues. So if you're doing Zooms for the first time, instead of doing it for the first time with your students, do it with a couple colleagues, and you can trade off who has control. You can practice sharing your screen, and you can get feedback from people that you trust, and you create a community of practice. You should also be talking with your students as appropriate for their age. So this doesn't mean that you have to be giving them a survey to see if they liked every activity, though you could with older students, but it means that you can ask them how they felt during a particular activity, or if activity was difficult, and get some feedback on that. I also like to ask my teacher training students how long they're taking on task. So if I set homework or I set some sort of task that they're supposed to be working on individually, I like to ask them how long, because that kind of helps to get, for you to take the temperature of how students are understanding. If they take a lot longer than you think they should take, then it's a good idea for you to kind of see, well, what's missing here? Why are you struggling? How can I help you and support you? So talking with your students is also really good to get some feedback on that. And then finally, there is observations and feedback. So I realize that for most teachers, observations are not pleasant or fun. They may be the stuff of nightmares, but I think one of the advantages of teaching online is the ease with which we can record ourselves and then maybe watch or listen to the audio or video later. It can be painful. I've done it. but it is also very helpful to start, noticing things about your teaching that you wouldn't notice otherwise. Um, so you can analyze specific aspects of instructions or how you give feedback, or you can also use it in order to observe students' speaking skills later. So I think that using observations and feedback, recording yourself, can be a very good tool. It can also be a good tool for you to observe other teachers. So you can do this almost that. In kind of a watch party way, where maybe you watch part of a class and you guys talk about how the instructions were done, or how a certain aspect of the class could have been done differently. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in a, the supervisor comes and watches you. It can be in a collaborative way. And one really thing that I really want to point out is that pre-service teachers, so the teachers that I work with right now who are beginning their teaching career, one of the best tools we have with them is for them to observe each other. Because when they watch me, they may say, well, whatever, you can do it. You've been doing this for a long time. But when they see how their peers are doing it, it gives them ideas of things that they feel more comfortable doing and incorporating into their classroom. So peer observation is good. Maybe you try it with one colleague, and then you kind of expand the circle to people that you feel comfortable with. Okay, so so the next idea is to do a little bit of action research. So not researching kind of a rigorous sense that we're going to publish, but here's one model, one way that we can use to reflect on our practice. So just as I said before, talking to colleagues, being reflective about our practice, asking questions, taking risk. It's also a really good idea to have some sort of somewhat formal process to make sure that we're doing the full cycle of reflection. So this one right here, we have some different R's that we're going to look at. We have 6 R's. So the first one is react. So we react to a problem or to a situation that we have in our classroom or in our teaching practice. So this is where we decide maybe what we want our focus to be. So for example, something that I noticed that I was missing a little bit as I started to teach more and more online was, increasing student talk time, increasing student interaction. So making sure that students were not just talking to me, but they were talking to each other. So from there you have your focus point. So there you go to record. So how are you going to actually assess your performance or your development in this area? So maybe you might include lesson plans, discussion, observations, recordings, student surveys if you think that's appropriate, but how are you going to track your progress? And then how are you going to review once you have a little bit of evidence or a little bit of lesson planning and observation and journaling? So how are you going to decide what worked well and what didn't work well? It's perfectly okay to try something and for it not to work so well. So maybe in this case, using images really helped to increase student talk time and student interaction. And I found that when I rushed activities, that's when it cut the student interaction. So you can kind of start to analyze using your lesson plans and your observations, what works and what doesn't work for your particular area of focus. And then you might continue to revise, because this is a cycle. We're always going to be going in a cycle as we teach new areas, maybe new levels, or we teach new groups of students. We're always going to be revising this. So what are you going to change? Okay, so I noticed that students don't do so well when I don't give them thinking time or when I try to rush them. So I'm going to build thinking time into my lesson plan as a way to help increase student talk time, increase student interaction. So the first question in React is what areas of my teaching practice are you going to focus on? Yeah, the word area is, it should be area. Thank you. And then finally, rework and reassess. So how will I put this into place? How successful were the strategies? So I'm just kind of bringing this around full circle. Okay. So some other steps that you can take is going into some more formal ways in order to reflect on your teaching practice. So one good place to start is a learning journal. So this might seem a little bit daunting, But you can do this in a couple different ways. You could have a written journal, or you could have a journal with different types of media. So you could use images, you could use voice notes, you could use written thoughts, you could use snapshots of your board, screenshots if you're teaching online. So just having a lot of different pieces of evidence for you to review at a later point. So another thing would be to use some questions to help you start thinking about your teaching. So if you haven't done a lot of reflecting on your teaching, these are some good questions to help you get started. So these are the same questions that we use to help the pre-service teachers, the teachers who are taking the initial teacher training course with us, to help them start to think about their lesson planning and their lesson delivery. So what went well in the class, right? As teachers, we often like to focus on what didn't go well or kind of mistakes that we made, but we also need to celebrate things that went really well, right? And also, how engaged were the students? So how did the students react to different activities that you did? And you can start to notice patterns. Maybe your students really like working in pairs rather than in larger groups. Maybe they really like games or a certain type of game. Maybe they really don't like listening activities, so you might need to find a different way to do those. And so how do I know learning took place? So what evidence do you have that your main objective was actually accomplished, right? And what could I have done differently? Not necessarily that things went wrong, but maybe you noticed that one question, you had several discussion questions, and one question really worked and one question didn't work. So, what could you do differently if you were going to teach this class again? Again, and the final point would be to come back to observation. So again, I think it's really not easy, but I think it's really there is some ease with which we can record our session, so we don't have someone physically in our classroom, which feels kind of awkward sometimes, but we can look at the recording either by ourselves or with someone else. We can edit the recording and just send part of that recording and say, hey, what do you think about this activity? What do you think about how I did instructions in this activity? And so you can get feedback on that specific area of your teaching practice. Okay. Okay, so just to give you an idea, so some areas that I'm working on are student talk time again. So, I was teaching a class earlier in May and June where I only had 4 students in the class, and sometimes one wouldn't show up. So it was often, and it was a lower level class. It was an A2 level class. So it was often a little bit of a struggle to get them going, to get them talking, especially to each other when there was really only maybe one pair or one group to make. So it was something that I really was focusing on incorporating into my classroom, and also monitoring. So monitoring our students, walking around, listening to them, writing down mistakes, noticing things that they're having trouble with. That can be a little bit more challenging online. So if you put them into breakout rooms, so small group rooms, you can only monitor one group at a time, right? So that can be a challenge. If we often as teachers were used to kind of looking at students to kind of seeing if they're confused, or looking maybe down at their paper to kind of see how they're doing. And we can't do that as much. We can do that in some ways. But it's something that we need to work on. So one solution that I have found is working with Google Docs. So I often have my students do the writing in Google Docs, and that way I can see it as they're writing, and I can make comments as they're writing. I'm kind of like a little ghost on the side saying, oh, think about this, or look at this, or what about this? And another area that I'm continuing to work on is student collaboration and interaction. So what are some good ways to get students to interact so that they're actually speaking English and that they're having fun doing it? So one way I was doing it was one tool that I have found is with the Google slide presentation that you saw. And so Alejandra, I see your question. That presentation right there was done with a class with about 16 students. So all of the students were, they were researching, and then they were talking. They were recording themselves, which is good because it gets them to practice pronunciation. They get to practice rephrasing something so that it sounds really good. But all of them were working, reading, and speaking at the same time. And then I can use that material later as a speaking, as a listening activity. Okay. So with larger groups, I think larger groups are going to be more difficult to monitor just because you have to bounce around between more of them. But you can make smaller groups. You can make groups of 3 students, and then maybe just start working with students to help them share their screen in order to help facilitate the conversation between them. And also, you can use Google Docs, or you can use other tools in order to have evidence of that interaction. So I'm going to show you another example. So from this same group. And so what I have here is these students had worked in pairs. This was a pair activity. They worked in pairs and they were telling a story because we had been working on the narrative tenses, the simple past, the past continuous, and the past perfect. And so here what they had to do, I gave them one document and all of them put their writing into this document. So we have one story here about a tennis tournament in Acapulco. We have another one here about a poor child, very bad childhood. And then there's another one here about somebody realizing their family wasn't home. So what I had them do was I had all of the pairs. So I think there were 7 or 8 pairs in this class. They all pasted their story into this document that they had worked on as a speaking activity. And what I did very quickly was I went through and highlighted some of the mistakes that I found, and then everyone, all 16 or 17 students, collaboratively edited all of the different stories. So they went through and they found, so you can see here, originally this word, tournament, was misspelled. Originally, this word was scary instead of scared. So I went through and bolded the mistakes, and then students could go through, find the mistakes that I had found and correct them, and maybe find some other mistakes. So this was an example of all 16 students working collaboratively on one document on writing, and I could see everything that was happening. I could see who was doing it, because in Google, you can see the different history. You can see them as they move their cursor. So this type of activity really allows you to monitor students and also to get feedback at the same time. It's not the same as listening to them chit chat in the classroom, but it is a way of seeing their thought process in writing that maybe we couldn't see before. Okay, so these are some areas that I'm working on, and these are some areas that I feel pretty good about in terms of my online teaching. So giving instructions and checking those instructions, selecting tools and apps to use, assessment, so using different assessment tools such as Google Forms, and also adapting and using my course book. And I do have a course book. So how do I take those activities that I maybe have used for a while in the face-to-face classroom and then transfer them online? So I gave you some examples of areas that I'm working on as an online teacher and areas that I feel good about, because I want to hear about your areas of strength and your areas of opportunity when it comes to teaching online. So first, if you want to write, what are your areas of strength? What do you do well in the online classroom? Instructions, building rapport, speaking activities, timing. So what are some things that you feel as though are your strengths in the online classroom? Okay, I'll give you a second to respond. Okay, good. So, okay. Follow up, feedback. So feeling close to your students, building rapport, that's good because that's difficult. Writing activities, making videos, online tools. Good. And so now what are some areas of opportunity or some areas of weakness that you're reflecting on, or maybe working to find some solutions to in the online classroom? Okay, so speaking practice, preparing the activity. Okay, so it looks like some people have certain things that they feel they do well, and then some people have those same exact things that they're struggling with. So this highlights, I think, the importance of collaborating and sharing ideas with each other. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about, and when it comes to, and so if you notice the little student up here, so this is about keeping students motivated, is about fostering autonomy in students. So if you had to answer 2 or 3 words, what would you say an autonomous learner is? So just 2 to 3 words of what autonomous learning means for you. Okay, good. So independent, curious, good. Responsible. So looking up the information, right? Self-driven, capable. So doing some study by themselves. Self-motivated, independent, good. So I think these are all great words to describe an autonomous learner. So this is just to kind of summarize what you guys are already putting in the chat. So an autonomous learner, they should play an active role in their learning. They should make some decisions about their learning. So for example, in the case of my students who did the gallery walkthrough, they got to choose what artwork. It had to be an artwork, but I had one student who chose a sculpture. So she asked me, teacher, can I talk about a sculpture? I was like, cool, as long as you have an artist and you have something to say about that artist and the piece of art, cool. They got to do something that they chose. And also reflecting and evaluating their own learning. So being aware of the things that they are learning, okay, or that they want to learn. Okay, so so I saw a really good presentation before the pandemic about fostering autonomy with students. This was especially with younger students, younger elementary students, but I think it also works with older students. And this would be thinking about what are some roles that students could take over in your classroom. So presenting a model of the target language, or, for example, them giving, if you're doing a review of verb tenses, students contributing and doing their own short presentations, correcting mistakes of other learners maybe, and doing open class feedback, making rules for behavior in class. So I think this is particularly important with elementary students, getting them involved in making the rules. Being a source of information and knowledge. So usually that's us that we do that, but how can we get our students to do that? Keeping discipline in the classroom and choosing learning material. So which of these roles that normally we play as teachers, which of these do you think that your students could take over? Maybe not every class, but maybe for some classes. Okay, so in the presentation that I saw on fostering more autonomy with our students, one of the really interesting things that the person talked about was, instead of us going over the answers, getting the students to take over that. And so I've done this even with A2 level students, A1 level, high A1 level students, where we've all done maybe a reading activity or a grammar activity or vocabulary activity with a limited number of answers. I'm not going to have them maybe lead a discussion, but with something that's multiple choice, or there's a short answer or something like that. And I get that student to come in front of the classroom, or in this case, I would hand over control to that student and they go over the answer. So, they might, and I give them a little script. So the answer to number 1 is, and then they get to say, Ariel, what is the answer to number 1? Or they use my little script. And even though this is something really short, it's something that I think really makes them feel more responsible and more in charge of things. Because for a lot of times for learners, especially younger learners, they get to make very few choices about their learning. So just handing that over to them and say, hey, it's your turn, you be the teacher. And they're like, oh, I get to be the teacher. And it's something that's really interesting for them. So I've done this in the classroom physically and also online. And one really good thing about it, even if it only lasts 2 or 3 minutes going over the answers, the person that's talking is a student. It is not you. So that's something that's really positive. And it also gets them to get more practice of talking to each other and not just always directing that language or their language at the teacher. And they get a little bit more comfortable with saying, that's not right, or yes, that's right, good job. So it builds a little bit more of a connection between them. Another thing that you could do would be to collect answers through the chat. And maybe have students correct each other's answers in a way. So you could put those You could put those questions or those answers in a Kahoot and have them decide if it's incorrect or correct. You could put them, like I did, into a Google Doc and have them correct each other's. And so then they're taking a little bit more ownership over, is this right or not? And then, recognizing things that that are right in their work and then other people's work. And then also I really like Juan Manuel's idea of asking them to rephrase instructions, or maybe even asking them to give the instructions. If the instructions are written, you can have them read the instructions and maybe ask, what are you doing, and kind of taking that role. So next, some other ways that we can foster autonomy is by giving students some self-access resources. So some resources that they can use outside the classroom. So I know as teachers, we often feel that we give them things and then they never use it. But there is always that one or those two students that do use it. So for example, I was teaching an A2 level class and I recorded my classes, and I had a student who wanted to see almost every single recorded class in order to practice. Some students didn't, but she did. So giving them the resources, the recording of the class. So if they miss a class, so I'm teaching a class right now that this week I had a student who says, I have social service, I can't do it, I can't come to class for a couple of days this week, can you give me the recording? So I've been providing her access to the recordings, and she has been doing all of the work. So I'm giving her the tools in order to be more autonomous. Another would be to give them resources like Quizlet. So Quizlet is a vocabulary, a flashcard website, and you can create lists, or you can find lists that other teachers have created, and you can have your students can practice. I would recommend, especially with the younger students, to use this first if you have Zoom or you're doing live sessions. So doing it first with them, showing them the features to guide them towards that autonomy, and then they can play that game. They can play the games from Quizlet on their own. The same with Kahoot. So we often think about playing Kahoot as an in-class activity, and I think it's a great in-class activity. Students find it very entertaining and very, very motivating. But one thing that you can use Kahoot for is as a challenge. So this would be where students play on their own time, and they can play it and they can see how many points they get. Then another platform that's similar to Kahoot that I tried the other day, and I thought I'm going to write it in the chat, that I really, really liked was Quizizz. So Quizizz is a little bit like Kahoot, but it's kind of like Kahoot on steroids. So when you get a question right, they show you a meme, so a funny image, and in English. You can earn badges. You can see how you compare to other people who've played the game, not just your class, but other ones. So I think both of them are really good. It just depends on what you like doing. And then I think another way to foster autonomy is through collaborative tasks. So having students work together to produce something rather than them always being dependent upon you. And then the third one is incorporating flipped learning into your teaching. So someone asked earlier about homework. And I think that we have to be very aware that, again, students have a lot of pressures. And homework may be something that's difficult. So we have to keep homework limited and super relevant for them. And they need to, like I said, as far as relevant, they need to see how it's going to improve their learning or how it's going to impact them and how they do in the class. So flipped learning is a way that you can do this. So flipped learning means instead of having the explanation in class, you have the explanation before. So those of you who really like making videos, this would be flipped learning is made for that. So you can have them watch the video or interact with the resource before your class. They need to also, when you do flipped learning, they need to do something with that video. You can't just give them the video and say, oh, cool. Because again, they're not going to see the purpose and they're not going to do it. And so you need to say, okay, here's a video and here are some questions, or here's a task to do based on that video. Because what that's going to do is going to help them focus on the most important parts of that video. And as you as a teacher, it will help you see what did they actually get from the video. So a really good tool is Edpuzzle. And so what Edpuzzle does is it allows you to take a video. It can be a YouTube video, a Khan Academy video, a National Geographic. It can be your own video. It accepts many different video formats, and you upload or you bring that video along into Edpuzzle, and you can insert questions into the video. So maybe at 45 seconds, you insert a question, a multiple choice question. At a minute 30, you insert another question. And what this does is it makes the students stop at different moments and answer a question. You can do multiple choice questions, or you can do short answer questions. And you as the teacher will see the responses. So you can see, oh, most people got the basic concept of the present perfect, or no one got it. Or I got two different groups going on here, and it can help you as far as your planning. And so that's something, using flipped learning can be more efficient when you're teaching online, because that video that you're going to have them watch before your live session, I'm not going to say there's no reason to watch it together, because you can use it in an active way, but having students watch it beforehand, they can watch it as many times as they need to understand. They can go ahead and get some of that basic concept of what you're going to be talking about, and then you can really get into it deeper into the your actual classroom, into your actual live session, because we don't often have a lot of time live with the students. So we need to use that as efficiently as possible. Okay. So, and as Gabriela says, so Edpuzzle brings in the listening, and you can also use a video in order to introduce other concepts like vocabulary. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is this model right here, and it looks a little bit confusing. So you might be looking at it like, why are all these circles? What's all this color? And what this is, it's a model of technology integration. And really what I want you to take away from this is the fact that we can't see teaching with technology as a separate thing. So motivating our students with technology, motivating ourselves to teach online, it requires us to incorporate all three of these areas into our teaching practice. We have what we know about English, our content, our subject matter, what we know about methodology, our pedagogy, and then we have what we know about technology. And I think, as we move forward to the new reality and whatever that means, we need to kind of start to see all of this as part of a whole. Not to see technology as something that we're struggling against, but seeing something that we continue to incorporate into our practice. So I see that there's a couple of questions. So about live worksheets, so good. So yeah, the new normal, la nueva normalidad, whatever that means. So I'm going to hand things over to Alejandra, and she's going to talk to you for a couple of minutes, and I'll be reviewing your questions in order to address them after Alejandra is done. Okay?
Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Okay. Not really. Can you see me now? Yes, you can see me now. Perfect. You can see, in fact, you can see me twice. All right, here we go. So thank you very much, Heather. And I'm sure that today we all learned some great new ideas to use in our classroom. Heather, please don't go. We'll come back for a questions and answer session. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So we'll come back for the question and answer sessions. So guys, don't worry, we'll be sharing the recording, okay? So hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to see you all here at our webinar series. As you know, International House is part of a big community of 160 schools in more than 50 countries around the world. We have been part of teachers' lives since 1953, helping more than 5,800 language teachers achieve their goals and improve their skills. I bet that some of you are part of our IH family, or hope that you will be. With all this experience and background, today, we are thrilled to announce the launch of our very own International House University, the first university specifically designed for language teachers that takes into account your experience and the need to maximize your time. At International House University, we have designed various programs and certifications that suit your needs. From graduate and postgraduate programs to continuous professional development programs, all of them aim at helping you achieve an extraordinary future. So just to give you a taste, we have the online Licenciatura Ejecutiva, which will help you get to your professional degree in just 1 year. I'll say that again. Our online Licenciatura Ejecutiva will help you get your professional degree in 12 months. We also have another option available as our online teaching program, which aims at providing teachers like us tools to deliver classes synchronously and asynchronously. The future is bright, but also has many challenges, so we should be ready for them. We hope to welcome you soon to our great educational community. Your local IH educational advisor is available to provide any information you may need. And now we'll have EduPaz giving a very short presentation, and Orlando, our head of teacher training, will also be joining us. So Orlando.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, can you hear me? Fantastic, awesome. So thank you Alejandra, and thank you Heather. And we're going to come back to Heather for all of your questions. Remember that you were typing your questions, and the questions in the Q&A section. I think we have around 16 questions that I think need some answering. So don't go, we'll definitely go back to those questions. Heather is reading them so that she can prep your answers, and I think now we have question 16 or 17, because Lorena is also asking another question in the chat. So guys, I just want to thank you for being here. Remember that this is a series of webinars that we're doing, to help people, to help teachers during these tough times, the new normalidad, right? Whatever that means, like Heather said. And also, like Alejandro said, we're launching the university. We're super happy. Thank you for all of your congrats. I think we couldn't be doing any of this without you. So I just want to spend just quick 5 minutes, I promise, because I know your time is precious, guys, and we also need to go back to Heather's answers on those 16, 15 questions we have. But I just wanted to give you some information, and we have a couple of programs this summer that we think would be useful for the IH community. Like we said, there is this new course, that we're launching in an online format, completely online, which is on screen, the Diplomado Internacional de la Enseñanza de Inglés. Because now as an international house university brand, now we can actually issue diplomados, right? So this is very good news. And it's also an international qualification, through the support, and through the global endeavors of Cambridge Assessment English, right? So, so this is, oh, sorry, let me just, there we go. So you can see my presentation, is that right? I think I moved this for a second, but can you see it? Yep. Awesome, fantastic. So fantastic, thank you. So what's CELTA completely online? You may know something about this already. We're running a course completely online, and it's one of the most recognized qualifications in the world. This is one of the most recognized qualifications in the world, and the one that many people decide to take to develop their teaching skills, or also to get started with an international qualification, right? So even if you have some experience, we have several candidates so far on the courses that we're running that have truly benefited, from the course. And now that everybody is in this new normalidad, teaching online, just like Heather said, this is also, quite an advantage of the course, because the course helps you to give classes online, because we're also combining this course option with our new certificate in teaching English online. Again, a diploma, a diplomado in enseñanza de inglés en línea. So it's basically those two courses that we're putting together So you're getting the CELTA certificate, Cambridge Assessment English certificate, the Diploma by International House University, Diplomado en la Enseñanza Internacional de Inglés, and also the Diplomado, the certificate in teaching English online. So it's actually three courses for one at the same time. I'll talk about cost in a second, Victor, because I have our friends from EduPass joining us in just 5 minutes, and they're going to be also talking about how we can help with financing, right? Because I know that during these difficult times of the pandemic, money is quite important. So we'll also be talking about how we can help you with financing your programs so that you can pay. Oh, Berta is already asking. Okay, I'll tell you in a second, Berta. Don't hang on, because it's a bit of a surprise, right? It's a bit of a surprise. All right. So again, you can take the course fully online from the comfort of your house. And I would like to stop here quickly, for a couple of seconds, because a couple of minutes, because the one thing that we're trying to do with all of our new courses that we're running in an online format is we want to provide flexibility, right? However lovely these webinars are, we try to run them short and sweet, 1 hour and a half tops, because we know people have only so much time and only so much of their attention span can be devoted to a screen on Zoom, right? So what we're trying to do with our online programs, all of our online programs, is we're trying to provide a really friendly online environment, which is a combination of both asynchronous and synchronous work, like Heather was saying, so for example, with CELTA, you only have to log in once a week, 3 or 3.5 hours a week, right? And then the rest of the course, you could take it at your own pace, in your free time. We have a course that is 12 weeks long. We have an option that is part-time, that is only 12 weeks. So you get 3 qualifications in 3 months, or you get the same qualifications in a semi-intensive format, which is only 6 weeks. We're starting a course on Monday. We started 2 semi-intensive courses, one this week and another one last week. We candidates from the UK, Switzerland. I think we have candidates from New Zealand. We have candidates from India. We have candidates from Mexico. We have candidates from France. We have a couple of candidates from Saudi Arabia. So we have candidates from all over the world who are taking out this course option because they can take the course as they're working, and they can take the course in a very flexible format, rather than a course that asks you 6 or 7 hours in front of your computer on Zoom. As much as we love Zoom, there's only so much people can do in front of a computer on Zoom, right? So, we're really trying to keep it super flexible, right? And we also have, if you're not just, if you're interested also, again, in developing your teaching skills, but also specializing in teaching kids and teenagers, because we know how lovely they are, but how hard it is to manage them, like you were asking in the quick Q&As to Heather. This is also another course option, the Diploma en la Enseñanza de Inglés, con especialización en niños y adolescentes. And again, this is another course that we're delivering fully online. We have just finished our first course fully online, and people were teaching adults, teenagers, and kids, so all across those 3 different age groups. Real classes online, helping them deliver those lessons, plan the lessons. People here in the questions were asking about getting help, for planning classes with kids. That's exactly what we're doing with them, and we're helping them develop their plans, in relation to activities, games, discipline issues, how to take your lovely ideas from the face-to-face setting to the online setting, and also, how you can simply, become a better practitioner when you're teaching kids and adolescents, right? So quite useful. And also, this course provides preparation, for, with the all favorite and always useful TKT modules, but also with the specialization in young learners through the TKT Young Learners modules, right? So it's something to bear in mind, something that could be helpful. And again, this is a flexible program. It's something that you could take, for example, we have a course right now starting in the summer. It's starting next Monday. That's a course that you could take. The course is only 6 weeks long. Or you also have another option that is 3 months, right? So again, all of this is happening because we want to make sure we help candidates, we help our IH community now in these hard times of the pandemic. And again, fully flexible because you have to connect for example, on the extensive course, you have to connect only once a week. On the intensive one, you connect just from, I think, 9 a.m. to 12:30, every morning. So it's kind of a part-time course, and you can take that from, again, the comfort of your home, of your house, fully online. We are actually, Lorena, going to continue with questions, definitely, the questions, the Q's and A's. Yes, we're coming back to that. So all of this is what we're doing, guys. I just want to show you, this is a testimonial that we got from one of our candidates on one of our online courses. I thought it would be useful. It's something I think nice to hear always, from our candidates and our courses to share their experience. So just one quick minute, and then it will be all from me, and then we'll come back to our friends from EduPass to see how they can help with financing so that we don't stop developing, and then final Q's and A's with Heather. Okay, so let's listen to what she has to say.
I had the opportunity to teach online my last 2 classes on the Zoom platform. I found that online teaching with Zoom was great. There is much more interaction and a greater ability to concentrate. I was able to develop the same skills, so reading, listening, writing, speaking, and so on. But it was easier to do so. For example, for the listening, each student had the recording there. They could increase or decrease the volume. Students were very enthusiastic because they were learning from the comfort of their home, but they were also able to see how online learning is beneficial for them. And teachers were able to identify and clarify those aspects that weren't clear to them. So it was very, very beneficial for both sides, so teachers and students. On the online platform, we were able to create breakout rooms where we could put students in, and they could work in pairs just like in a normal class. But the difference is that teachers were able to get into those breakout rooms and monitor them very, very intensively. It was very good for them because there is no chance of distraction whatsoever. So if you're put in a breakout room and students are working together, the teacher is able to keep track of your progress and also step in when it's needed. And I really like how the platform worked, so how Zoom worked. And I think it's very, very good for students and teachers because it gives teachers the chance to, really work with the students and hear their mistakes, whereas in a classroom environment, it would be harder to track them. I would really suggest choosing to work online.
So again, this was one of our candidates, testimonial from a candidate taking one of the online courses with us, teacher training course, and also all of the different things that we've been helping them with, this candidate, and how she enjoyed the online experience of their online teacher training course and teaching on Zoom. Precisely, Lorena, yeah, exactly, she was teaching on Zoom. But also remember that all of our online teacher training courses go beyond that in terms of not just Zoom, but they help you to different degrees. Plan classes online, for young learners, adolescents, adults, using a range of different technologies, not just Zoom, but like things like Google Classroom, Edmodo, Google Docs, Jamboard, all of those different tools. And of course, it depends on the program that you're taking. So for people interested, we have these 2 courses starting Monday. July 13th. That's just around the corner. And so can you send me a phone number? Berta is asking. But please approach your IH academic advisor if you're working with one. And if not, of course, remember that you can always reach out to, this email I'm typing. So tttmx@IH Mexico, and we'll be super happy to help, right? So I'm gonna let me, I think, sorry, Brittany is asking, will be July the 20th. We start saying on Monday, Brittany. So if you are interested, call us now, right? So I'm gonna hand it over back to Heather.
Okay.
Heather, we're going to have our friends of EduPass at the end. So maybe we could take advantage of your time with questions and answers. And then I'll come back to those questions on prices, on costs, and also people interested in other things they could do with us, right? But I think people are very interested to hear what you have to say, Heather. So I'll stop sharing and I'll hand it over to you, okay?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to throw up a whiteboard real quick because I've been answering some questions in the chat, and I just want to make sure that you're all getting some of the resources that I'm mentioning. One thing that I saw was people asked about different age groups. So for the little ones, so we're going to say pre-K to lower elementary. A really good thing is to keep a routine. So I think there were maybe 4 or 5 questions about this. So having some sort of routine. So what students are going to do kind of pre-session, while session, and post. It's like when we have in the classroom, we have our assembly. And then we have what we, our maybe our learning centers or something of that nature. So I think routine is important. Storytelling continues to be important, and you can take advantage of some of the there's some nice videos on YouTube of people reading stories that are really well done. So continuing to use that. So having a pre and then while and then post session. So maybe you only have 30 minutes with students. Because they're so young. And so maybe you have something, they're going to listen to a song beforehand, and then maybe you go into the vocabulary of the song during the session that you have. So having a routine that teachers can help, that parents can help with is very important. And then I think Padlet is a very good way of working with this particular group. So Padlet, Padlet is Padlet.com. And so this is a really good way of you providing resources to the parents. So you can have different columns with different types of resources. And then you can also have parents take pictures of evidence of their students, and you can post it there. And you can make the Padlet password protected so that only parents of the school can enter. So I think Padlet's a good way of blasting resources out and also showing what your students are doing. So maybe they're making a sandwich, because you were talking about food groups, and they can, their parents can take a picture of that, or they can write and parents can take pictures of that. Another really good resource is Read and Write. It's for Google. And so the way it works is when you open up a website, across the top, there are some tools, and students can have a website read to them slowly. And they can also highlight words and see the definition in a picture dictionary, as well as in a words, if that's age appropriate. And then I saw some questions about for slightly older, so maybe upper elementary and secondary students. And Flipgrid is a really good tool for this. So Flipgrid is a little bit like social media, but the good thing about it is that it's not social media. So you can create a thread, a conversation thread, much like you would on WhatsApp, and then you can throw out a question. You can maybe even make a little video of yourself, and then students can respond to that question, and then they can respond to each other. They can put stickers, they can do different animations in the video, which is very attractive for this group, but they're responding to each other is a really good aspect of this. And So I also had some questions about Zoom and breakout rooms. So breakout rooms in Spanish, they are called salas de grupos pequeños. And so there's a little group of 4 blocks, and that's where you can find the breakout rooms. So some features of breakout rooms, you can have the number of students. So you can decide, do you want 2 or 3 in a group, 4 or 5? You can have it done manually or automatically. So, so you can have where you put the students into groups or where the system does. You can have time limits, and you can broadcast messages from there. So maybe a reminder or something that you noticed. And let me see some of the other questions that. Okay, and I think some people asked about Google Apps. So for education, so some of the really good ones are Jamboard. It's kind of like a virtual whiteboard, but you can set them up. So I used this with my students the other day to play tic-tac-toe. So I just put an image of the tic-tac-toe board, and then I use sticky notes that are in Jamboard to put, we were looking at irregular verbs in the past tense, and they had to take the sticky note and edit it to make the word into the simple past. So Jamboard is easy for you to set up whiteboards or to put images of vocabulary beforehand, and students can interact with the Jamboard. Then we have Google Docs, which we saw an example of earlier. Slides, which is for presentations and also for collaborative presentations. Forms, I really like to use for assessments. And you can also use sheets for attendance. And one thing about for Google Apps is to look for Google Educator. So we have level 1 and level 2. And so Google provides some training for you to kind of to see how other people use this app and to get something that says, I know how to use Google Apps. Let me see some other questions. Let me see some of the questions that have just come in. So one thing about speaking and participating with, even if you have large groups, I think if you can do breakout rooms, they work really well. Because one thing I noticed when I was teaching, it was a small group of students, but even when I was going to do pair activities and we were in the main session, they felt kind of like, oh, the teacher's watching us. So even when I only had 2 or 3 students, I would put them in a breakout room and I would leave them for 1 minute or so. And then I would go in, and they had struck up a nice conversation. You could also, if you don't have breakout rooms, if you don't have Zoom, WebEx is another video conferencing platform that has breakout rooms. They're audio only. Students can't see each other, but they do have those types of breakout rooms. And you could have students, if you have older students, you could have students start their own Google Meet session, and then you could join in. It would be a little bit logistically challenging with a large group, but you could do it that way as well. And also, I think speaking, giving students a chance to record themselves speaking is a good way of doing speaking in this online classroom, because we often don't have a chance to get around to all of them or to listen to them individually speak. So having them record themselves is a good way around that. We would recognize that if students are going to record themselves, they're probably going to do it 2 or 3 times, and we can be okay with that. Recognizing that if the student practiced 2 or 3 times, that was a lot of speaking on their part, a lot of practicing, a lot of checking pronunciation, and that's also learning. Let me see some other question. Okay. So yeah, Carmen, I think that doing this with younger students is particularly challenging. I think there are some resources out there, but I think this is something that hasn't been done as much in the past. So we're kind of all learning. One suggestion, Carmen, for this would be to look at the models of virtual kindergartens in the United States. So most states in the US have a virtual kindergarten. So everything is online, and you can kind of see some of their models. They use a flex model where students mostly work by themselves and then check in, obviously with the parents' help. So looking at some of those models could be a way to see what has been done and then adapt it to your circumstances. So I think that is most of. So I'm not sure with Celia, what does Meet, do you mean have breakout rooms? Do you mean Google, like, do you mean Microsoft Teams? Or I'm not sure with Meet. Working with people with special needs, Lorena, there are some really good, so Read Write for Google Chrome is a very good, so I'm going to write it, it's right here, is a very good, it would be good for accessibility. As well as for younger students, because it will highlight what's being read for the student, and they can also look up words. There are some also really good tools within Google. So Google Docs tools. So we have the Explore function as well as the dictionary function. Students can look up words, and also I would recommend getting some sort of, you can use screen readers. So this will read everything that's on the screen for students who have problems hearing with reading. There are also, so they could, ways for them to dictate. So you can do this within Google. So the student could dictate to Google and it would be written what they said. This is a little bit challenging with students who maybe have a lower level of English, but you could do that. And then there are also other ways to make screens. You can look for ways to make screens, the colors a little bit less distracting or a little bit easier for certain students to see. So looking up some accessibility tools, Google has a lot of those that make it a little bit easier for students to work with things. And then Google Arts. So Maria del Pilar, yeah, I really like Google Arts and Culture. You can, there are videos up there that go into different paintings that are good for maybe for slightly higher levels, but there are also just paintings that you could have students describe. So let me open the chat so that I can see exactly what's going on in the chat. Okay. No, with breakout rooms, you can do breakout rooms for free. They are, they're not in the pro version. One thing that is in the business version is having longer sessions, but they're usually in the bottom. And you do have to be, I'm going back to Zoom. You do have to be the host of the session in order to be able to use the breakout rooms, but you can use them in the free version. And let me see. So Lorena, as far as all of the apps that Google offers, I think that they are very good. They're thought out for education. I use some of them more than others. Like Google Sheets is like a spreadsheet, and I don't use that as much for English language teaching, but I use Google Docs a lot, and I use Google Forms, and I use Google Classroom. So, trying out one app at a time is a very good way to kind of see, how is this useful? So, how can I use this to substitute something that I'm doing or to make something that I'm doing better? And how are students going to interact with this? So you can kind of look at the different apps that Google offers and see which ones work best for you. But I really like them because they make kind of, they form part of this ecosystem that everything collaborates and talks to each other. Okay, so I'm not sure if I should hand it back or if I should continue to answer questions.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I don't know. I think, have we answered most of the questions?
I think we've answered most of the big topics that came up.
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah. I think there was only, I know there were also some questions on how to do this with preschoolers. I don't know if you'd like.
I did answer. Yeah. So with younger students, I think the younger the students are, the more important the routine is. The idea of having a routine and just being very specific, from 9 to 9:10, you're going to watch the video and sing the song. Something that parents can follow along really well with, and then kind of maximizing the use of that 30 minutes in order to, have students, asking questions about vocabulary and making it as active as possible. So for example, having students go and run and find in their house something that starts with B, right? So having them go right, maybe right on the screens, what is a word that starts with S? If they are, at that age where they can maybe either draw stuff using Pictionary, and you can use Pictionary in all of the different web conferencing softwares. You can use you can use Pictionary or some sort of drawing function for that. Somebody mentioned Nearpod earlier. Nearpod Kids also has a drawing function that's really fun. So teaching adults learning basic English, yes. Are there challenges? Yes, especially if they have a poor connection. Listening can be a problem. But I'm an A2 level French learner taking French classes, so I'm a basic level French learner taking classes through Zoom. I have taught A2 level classes through Zoom. So yes, these are tools. Maybe you have to be slightly more patient. You have to really think about using the visuals, like I was talking about earlier, putting it on the screen, the instructions, as well as saying them, and also writing them in the chat so that students always can see what you're referring to. So yeah, this can be used for any level. Just have to make sure that we're being appropriate with our use of language, just like always.
Fantastic. So I think that's pretty much everything, right? Heather, will that be everything? Yeah. Oh, Patricia is asking. Patricia, I know we've been reading your question. Patricia is asking a very specific question on teaching online, well, rather teaching reading and writing to 5-year-olds online. I think it's been quite a consistent question, I think, in quite a few sessions. So I think we're definitely going to be running a session just on teaching preschoolers, because I think that was a suggestion from other people that have been attending the session. So we're definitely going to be planning that for you guys. We're going to be running that. Maybe give us like a couple of weeks to organize something and get you either maybe Heather again, because I know like you love her and she's super cool and she's been an excellent speaker, or somebody else, right? We just need to double check agendas. But I don't know, Heather, if you have any quick brief tips for that, for like 5-year-olds, like teaching reading or writing.
I think the biggest thing there is getting the parents on board. And making sure that you're like, a lot of the books that we use with that age group do come with some sort of apps, and making sure that you're aware of all of the apps that those are, all of the features that those apps offer. But some of this, because it's physical, students have to physically develop these skills of reading and writing. So I think that parents have to become an ally in that, and also documenting the process, either by taking pictures or videos of their little ones learning. But they definitely have to be a big part of that, because I know that sometimes we see them as obstacles as much as we see them as allies, and I think bringing them on as allies as much as possible.
Fantastic. All right. So, well, thank you very much, Heather. I think it's been a great talk. Everybody, has been super, super positive about your talk today. So I'm pretty sure they found it really helpful. So thank you very much, Heather. I think Heather deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. So a round of applause, for Heather. I thought it was truly amazing. Is there a way you can get in touch with Heather already? They're asking you. Definitely. So 2 things that we could do for that. We're definitely going to have Heather back.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Right.
Facebook,
so just how should they find you? Heather Gaddis?
Yeah, Heather Gaddis on LinkedIn. You can find me that way.
Fantastic. So that's so thank you for that, because most people wouldn't share their LinkedIn details. So thank you for thank you for that, Heather. So thank you very much. And guys, so I'm just going to wrap things up. Again, people were asking about prices. I know people were asking about prices, so I'm just going to share this again. Just give me a second, guys, and then I'm going to finalize this with our friends from EduPath. So I was saying, we were talking about these 2 courses. Let me go back to this. So for CELTA, We're offering a course starting on Monday. That's a semi-intensive course, where you log in just twice a week for 4 hours, twice a week, and then the rest you can work at your own pace, from the comfort of your home. And remember, this is 3 qualifications in one, really, because it's our diplomado in Enseñanza del Inglés, the International Cambridge Assessment English course, and the Diplomado, the Certificate in Teaching English Online. And I'm now answering your questions on courses. This course is $1,400 US, but just for the summer, we have a 15% discount. This is summer sale. So I think with the current exchange rate, I think that's something like what, like 26,000, like 26,000 or 25,000. I think it's a really good price, for 3 qualifications. And then the other course where you can meet Heather. People were asking about how they could get in touch with Heather. So Heather is actually one of our tutors, the main course tutor on the course that we are starting on Monday. And this is the Diplomado en Enseñanza de Inglés con especialización en niños y adolescentes. So our star Heather, if you want to have her as your own personal tutor on the course, you will be able to have her as long as Heather doesn't mind getting like 200 people to work with Heather. You can all be her candidates, and the course is 3,500 MXN. So these are Mexican pesos. And again, we know that under these difficult times, the pandemic and the global situation that we're all going through, price is something important. So I got our friends from EduPass. I would like to introduce you to Mitsuo. ¿Estás ahí, Mitsuo?
Aquí estoy, Orlando, aquí andamos, todo bien.
Perfecto, excelente. Pues les voy a presentar a Mitsuo, es nuestro amigo de EduPass, y digo amigo porque hace cosas muy buenas por nosotros para proveer a los candidatos que tenemos de la comunidad de IH México, de la Universidad de International House University, con opciones para financiamiento. Y hoy le quise pedir a Mitsuo que nos hablara de lo que puedes hacer por nosotros, Mitsuo, pero también a lo mejor la gente está preguntando específicamente por ejemplos de corridas financieras, porque, por ejemplo, en este caso a lo mejor 30,500 se escucha un poquito muy alto, ¿no? Pero quizás a lo mejor nos podrías dar ejemplos de una corrida de este curso, que es ahorita en el verano, son creo que 25,000, 26,000 pesos, y una corrida de este curso de 30,500. Y también la gente, como ves en el chat, nos ha estado preguntando mucho de la licenciatura, ¿no? Entonces, a lo mejor esos 3 ejemplos, no sé si nos ayudas con eso, y puedes compartir en pantalla y ya yo me callo. Y ya te paso la palabra a ti. ¿Te parece?
Ok, amigo, perfecto, no te preocupes. Y bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. Les agradezco por el espacio. Y bueno, vamos a hacer unos pequeños ejercicios, ¿ok? Pero bueno, antes quisiera como rápidamente presentar los requisitos, ¿ok? Ya a lo mejor algunos estuvieron, pero bueno, nosotros somos una institución financiera que otorgamos los créditos educativos solamente para estudiar en México o en el extranjero, ¿ok? Cualquier nivel. Los requisitos son muy sencillos. Realmente nada más necesitamos que tengan un buen historial de crédito, que nos puedan comprobar ingresos y que tengan entre 21 y 69 años, ¿ok? Nuestro proceso realmente viene siendo 100% digital. Podemos financiar en este caso el 100% del curso, el 50%, el 20%, ya ustedes dependiendo cómo se puedan ajustarse mejor, ¿sale? Los montos pues desde 10,000 hasta 800,000 pesos. En este caso pues nada más hablamos de montos a lo mejor de 30, 20 y tantos mil pesos, ¿sale? Los plazos pueden ser desde 6 hasta 24 meses o 36, pero bueno, dependiendo, ahí yo los voy asesorando, no les voy a meter un financiamiento a lo mejor de 20,000 pesos a 3 años, ¿no? Sino nosotros vamos asesorándolos en esa parte. Aquí vienen los ejercicios que me comentaba mi compañero Orlando. Ahorita si gustan podemos ver también la tabla de amortización, pero bueno, nosotros, por ejemplo, en este caso de 30,500 pesos, lo podemos meter a 12 meses, ¿ok? Si ustedes se dan cuenta, de este lado, el lado derecho, esto es lo que estarían pagando mensualmente, 3,064 pesos, ¿ok? Aquí ya viene incluido un seguro, que es un seguro de vida y un seguro de desempleo de 3 meses, ¿ok? Ustedes están pagando 3,064 pesos al mes. La tasa de interés, bueno, es el 2,42 mensual, tasa de interés anual, 29%, ¿ok? No se asusten de decir, ay, oye, 29%, no van a pagar realmente en capital este 29%. Ustedes realmente, el monto de interés que estarían pagando por este crédito de 30,000 son 5,000 pesos de capital de interés. Es decir, si ustedes sacan más o menos el cálculo, estamos hablando de un 16,5%, ¿ok? De capital por este año de crédito, ¿sale? Se paga una comisión por apertura, se estarían pagando 2,059 pesos, ¿ok? Lo cual podemos nosotros dividir en 2 pagos, ¿sale? Entonces, este viene siendo esa estructura. Lógicamente, todo esto se maneja sobre saldos insolutos. ¿A qué me refiero con eso? Que si en un momento dado ustedes terminan o quieren liquidar su crédito antes, ¿ok? Nosotros el interés lo vamos a calcular sobre el monto que deban en ese momento, ¿ok? Por eso es que el interés va disminuyendo. Si ustedes me dicen, Mitsuo, te quiero liquidar esto en 3 meses, ¿ok? Yo en ese momento solamente les voy a cobrar el interés de los 3 meses que han transcurrido, ¿ok? Es decir, van a estar pagando menos de estos 5,000. La idea es que no se descapitalicen, sino que tengan una flexibilidad para que puedan pagar este curso mucho más sencillo, ¿sale? Ahora, el programa de 26,000 pesos, ¿ok? Estamos hablando de a 12 meses, estarían pagando 2,612 pesos mensuales, ¿sale? De interés, solamente lo que estarían pagando son 4,290 pesos, ¿ok? Hablamos de nuevo más o menos de un 16,5% de capital por este año de crédito, ¿ok? Y la comisión por apertura, estamos hablando de 1,798, que lo podemos dividir en 2 pagos y con esto ustedes empiezan a tomar su programa, ¿ok? Recuerden que la idea es que ustedes puedan ya de una vez tomar su curso y poco a poco lo vayan pagando. Si en un momento dado lo quieren liquidar en diciembre, a lo mejor que son los aguinaldos, pues adelante, lo pueden hacer, ¿no? ¿Ok? Entonces, bueno, este es nuestro proceso, es súper sencillo, solamente se meten a una liga que es financiamiento.edupaz.mx, ¿ok? Van metiendo sus datos, ahí van a ver su preaprobación en 10 minutos, van a subir su documentación y van a descargar su contrato, ¿sale? Como ven, es algo súper sencillo. Voy a compartir igual no sé si alguien quiera como hacer un ejercicio un poquito más detallado, lo podemos realizar. Denme un segundo.
Sí, aquí están preguntando sobre la licenciatura también. Si a lo mejor te puedes hacer un ejercicio con ese costo de lo que hicimos de la licenciatura, que era 70,000 por todo el
Claro.
programa.
A ver, voy a hacer esta corrida por 70,000 pesos.
Y como es un programa de un año, no sé, a lo mejor puede ser un poquito más largo, a lo mejor a 2 o 3 años.
Claro. Vamos a hacerlo. Yo normalmente lo que les comento es, no te descapitalices, pactémoslo a un plazo largo, que sería a lo mejor a 3 años. Estarían pagando 3,335 pesos mensuales, ¿ok? Pero ustedes lo pueden liquidar en el momento que quieran, ¿ok? Si en un momento dado ustedes lo quieren liquidar a 6 meses, lo liquidan en 6 meses, ¿ok? En este caso, por 70,000, pagan 3,335, estarían pagando 13,516 pesos, ¿ok? Por año de crédito. Es decir, aquí ya hablamos, como es un interés más alto, estamos hablando que es un interés 19% de capital por año de crédito, ¿ok? ¿Qué pasa? Aquí si en un momento dado dicen, bueno, voy a estar pagando 13,516 por ese año, pero si en un momento dado ustedes lo terminan de pagar en 12 meses, ya no estarían pagando esa cantidad, sino estarían pagando menos, es decir, 11,552. Si lo terminan de pagar en 6 meses, pues terminan de pagar 5,630, ¿sale? Todo va a depender si van haciendo abonos a capital o lo quieran liquidar en una sola exhibición, ¿ok? Pero la idea es que páctalo un plazo largo, no te descapitalizas y vas haciendo abonos a capital, ¿sale? Para que no tengan ese tema de, ay, ahorita lo pacté a 12 meses, que a lo mejor lo pactas a un año, voy a tener una mensualidad de 7,000 pesos, te vas a presionar, si en un momento dado no llegas a estos 7,000 pesos, pagas 6,000, ya te va a generar un interés moratorio, ¿ok? Entonces, mejor páctalo un plazo largo, te vas más tranquilo y vas abonando o te haces como esa idea de pagar los 7,000, 8,000 pesos para que lo termines en ese año, ¿ok? Y todo el interés se va calculando sobre el saldo insoluto, sobre lo que va quedando de tu deuda, ¿ok? Bueno, estos son los ejercicios. De todos modos, si están interesados, pueden contactar a Orlando. Orlando ya me pasaría sus datos y yo, bueno, ya estaría yo comunicándome con ustedes. Recuerden, es muy sencillo, solamente es tener buen historial de crédito y que me puedan comprobar ingresos, ¿sale? Entonces, bueno, Orlando, muchísimas gracias por el espacio. Espero que pues haya varios inscritos y bueno, que los podamos ayudar nosotros.
Perfecto, claro que sí. Y esa es la idea de nuestros amigos de EduPass. Pues muchísimas gracias, Mitsuo.
Gracias a ti.
Perfecto, gracias. So guys, all right, so thank you, EduPass. So we're just going to wrap this up, and remember that we're giving this series of webinars. Join, we're super excited to have you every single time. I think as much as we can, right? We would love to have you. We have 2 more webinars for next week. We have Wednesday. That's Wednesday next week, July the 15th, and we have teaching writing skills online. We're going to have one of our tutors, from our staff, helping you develop different tasks. There will be practical examples as well, and also I'll get to wrap the series of webinars up next week. I'm going to have the pleasure of working with you online on Thursday next week, and I'll be helping you with 3 specific clear-cut examples for how to teach vocabulary online. I'll be providing you with tools for that, and I'm going to have you produce 1 vocabulary activity online that you could try with your learners in real time that day, right? So join. And tomorrow we have 1 more, right? Remember, don't go. I'll give you the links to the webinars in a second in the chat. Tomorrow we have 1 more. It's how to make the most of speaking lessons online. The tutor is going to be Ricardo Fajardo, one of our best speakers in the house, along with Heather, of course. I think they both, compete, head to head, I think. And he'll be talking about how to scaffold your activities online, right? So join. If you haven't joined, please join now. I'm going to share the, I'll answer your question in a second, Lydia. I'm going to share the links in the chat so that you can join. So there we go. This is for tomorrow. Then this is for next week. Let me just share it again. There we go, for next week. And then 1 more for next week as well, right? So you have 3 more. There you go. Join now. Because we are closing, we're closing the registration, very soon. So join tomorrow. Join now for the webinar tomorrow, and we'll be super happy to help with that. And again, thank you guys. People are asking about the recordings from the other webinars. We are going to be sending you a link to a feedback form. Remember that we're trying to run these webinars to the best of our capabilities for a wide audience of people that are tuning in from different parts of the world, and also for our IH schools, IH Quality Circle schools, the IH community, and we always benefit from feedback. So when you receive that form, that feedback form, please complete it, because once you have completed the feedback form, you will receive the recording to the previous webinars, right? So no feedback, no recording. Sorry about that, but we really want your feedback. We really want to hear what you think, because today we got a very useful suggestion for running a webinar on preschooler teachers. I got that written down. We're going to run one. We're going to organize it, and I promise you, it's going to be amazing, right? So just give us some time. So any suggestions you have, just complete the Google form so that we can also send you the feedback, right? Sorry, the feedback, the recording for the previous sessions, right? So thank you very much. And, you know, I think that would be all for now. I don't know if Ariel, you would like to say, you know, or Alejandra, you know, a couple of final words, you know, or for our audience, you know, they're still here, loyal to the course. So would you like to say anything?
Yeah. Orlando, thank you very much. It was great to have you, everybody here. Yes. Again, it's great to have you at the International House. See you tomorrow. Remember, see you tomorrow. That's very important. Okay. Thank you, Orlando. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, hasta mañana.
Hasta mañana. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.